I'll call to order the City of Santa Barbara's Finance Committee for October 2nd. And we have one item on the agenda, which is debt forgiveness on property located at 116 De La Vina Street, the Garden Court. But before we get to that item, is there anyone in the audience who would like to speak to anything that is not on the agenda for the Finance Committee but is within our jurisdiction and purview? Seeing no one, we'll go to the first item. Mr. Rowell?
Good afternoon, Chairman Hart and Finance Committee members. My name is David Rowell, the Housing Project Planner. This is a recommendation that the Finance Committee recommend that City Council approve a cancellation and full release of the loan agreement funded with Redevelopment Agency Housing Set-Aside Funds, approve a reconveyance of the deed of trust securing that loan agreement, approve an amendment to the Affordability Control Covenant imposed on real property, and authorize the Community Development Director to execute such agreements and related documents as necessary. Now for a little background on Garden Court. On July 8th, 1997, the former Redevelopment Agency Board approved a $2.75 million loan to De La Vina Associates LP to acquire the land and support development of Garden Court, the 98-unit residential project located at 1116 to 1132 De La Vina Street. That same year, the project developer, De La Vina Associates LP, and city staff requested the involvement of the Housing Authority of the City of Santa Barbara to assist with securing development entitlements, obtaining financial approvals, ensure the property would be well managed. The Housing Authority's involvement allowed the development to be processed as a quasi-public facility and secure 300% bonus density and major parking modifications through a conditional use permit. This enabled the development of an extremely successful, affordable, and services-rich residential facility for frail, low-income seniors. Here's a picture of Garden Court. It's a beautiful project. It's a model project. The tenants that live there are extremely happy. The typical tenant is extremely low income, relying just on Social Security fixed income. They pay 30% of their gross income for rent, and then they purchase an additional service package for $415 a month that provides 3 meals a day, transportation services, cleaning services, and other services. This is a picture of the dining area. The city was concerned that this privately owned project would lose its affordability restrictions after 55 years when the tax regulatory agreement was scheduled to expire. The city's interests were protected by having Housing Authority as the master lessee of the project for the initial 15-year tax credit compliance period, which included the option to purchase Garden Court. So let's take a look at the original project funding sources. As I mentioned before, the Redevelopment Agency loan for $2.75 million. The low-income housing tax credit awards were $4,129,971, and a permanent loan from the no longer existing Santa Barbara Bank and Trust for $320,000, for a total original project funding of $7,199,971. A real bargain in today's world. This same project would be probably about 4 times as much to purchase land and develop it today. So now let's fast forward in time to June of this year, June 2018. The Housing Authority exercised its purchase option under its nonprofit entity, Santa Barbara Affordable Housing Group. The Santa Barbara Affordable Housing Group's assets, operation, and management are all legally and effectively controlled by the Housing Authority. The Housing Authority purchased Garden Court in order to preserve the property and continue the provision of affordable housing. Unfortunately, the purchase price of Garden Court was substantially more than was envisioned, which required Housing Authority to provide more financing. So let's take a look at the acquisition funding sources. The assumption of the city loan, with no payments, the balance has risen to June of this year an estimated $5,245,017. The assumption of the existing Housing Authority loan. About 2 years ago, Housing Authority assumed the Santa Barbara Bank and Trust loan, so that balance now is $195,131. The new Housing Authority loan for $2,292,000, and then cash equity from the Santa Barbara Affordable Housing Group of $4,467,852 for a purchase price of $12.2 million. Now let's take a look at the city loan itself. The city loan is due and payable December 1st, 2037. It has a 4.5% interest rate. The current outstanding balance is estimated at $5,285,250 as of October 2018, right now.
I just want to ask about this previous slide before I'm getting a little confused. Well, I won't be able to follow unless I clear this up.
Councilmember Dominguez has a question.
The this $12 million total you're talking about on slide 12, and then slide 10 has a total of $7 million. Can you just map out which loans are which? There's a redevelopment agency loan of $2.7 million. Is that the same as the city loan for $5.2 million?
Member Dominguez, it's the same exact loan. What has happened is the original loan balance was $2.75 million. There's been no payments. It's a simple interest loan, collecting interest at 4.5%. So fast forward in time 21 years, and there you have it. And it's now a balance of $5,245,017. So it is the same loan in answer to your question.
And the new loan, that was what was taken out to cover the difference between the purchase price.
That's correct.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Mr. Al, go ahead.
So let's take a look at the city loan. It's due and payable December 1st, 2037 with a 4.5% interest rate. The current outstanding balance is $5,285,250 as of October 2018. Repayment to the city is based on residual receipt payments, which is basically taking your gross rents, subtracting your operating expenses, allowing for reserves, and payment of superior debt. If there's any positive cash flow remaining, the city would have received a payment. As of today, we've received no payments due to significant operating and preservation expenses, funding of reserves, the food program, and other supportive services. So now let's look at the current projected operating statement. So that first line, net operating income, that's basically just taking the gross rents and subtracting out your operating expenses. So that is an annual figure, and it's a positive $363,775 before any debt service and before allowing for reserves. So if you take the pending Montecito Bank and Trust loan debt service, that's $350,547. The Housing Authority debt service, that's the loan they assumed from Santa Barbara Bank and Trust, is $23,023. And then the Tax Credit Allocation Committee has a required minimum reserve of $31,127. So the net operating income after debt service and reserves is a negative $40,922 per year. So the high cost of such an operation, combined with the project's limited revenue, will not support a payment on the city loan. Prior to Housing Authority's acquisition, the project reserves were substantially depleted. Adequate reserves are necessary for an aging project to cover any future rehabilitation expenses to extend its useful life. And as you may recall, TCAC also has a reserve requirement. So let's talk about the debt forgiveness request from the Housing Authority. Debt forgiveness was discussed from project inception to occur concurrently with the sale of the property to the Housing Authority. The original redevelopment agency agenda report dated July 3rd, 1997 states, and I quote, "If the project is eventually transferred to the Housing Authority, it is likely that they will request this loan be converted to a grant at that time." In terms of the long-term affordability of this project, the city's covenant requires the property to remain affordable until the year 2055. This term coincides with the low-income tax credit regulatory agreement. As a condition of this debt forgiveness, the Housing Authority has agreed to extend the property's affordability until the year 2087, which is 90 years from inception, or 1997. So let's just talk for a moment about the need for senior housing. In the agenda report that you have, there's much more discussion on this, but here's a couple of highlights. In less than 2 decades, older adults are projected to outnumber youth for the first time in U.S. history. 8% of the city of Santa Barbara's homeless population is made up of individuals over 65 years old. And the Housing Authority currently has 933 applicants on their senior housing wait list, which includes 281 senior applicants on the wait list for Garden Court alone. So here's another picture of Garden Court. It's obviously a model for delivery of independent assisted living to extremely low-income seniors on fixed Social Security income. And the Housing Authority is using this as a model for Gardens on Hope that they did a groundbreaking ceremony, about 2 or 3 weeks ago. And I believe that project is a total of 89 units. So why is staff recommending debt forgiveness on Garden Court? Well, first and foremost, the Housing Authority has a unique partnership with the city. They are the affordable housing arm of the city. Together, we have built many high-quality affordable housing projects in the city. The project's current projected financial reports do not support a payment to the city, as I've demonstrated earlier. The project was constructed with the assistance of low-income housing tax credits, which required that the city provide a loan, not a grant. Debt forgiveness will ensure Garden Court's long-term financial viability. The Housing Authority consistently adheres to its contractual obligations. Currently, they're making payments to the city on 6 loan agreements totaling $47,015 per month, and they've affectionately called me their banker at times. The other condition is that, of course, the affordability requirement will be extended to the year 2087. So if you were to compare this project to a new construction affordable project today, our typical subsidy is $120,000 per unit. The Garden Court subsidy, even at the balance of $5.28 million, only represents a subsidy of $54,433. That's taking the $5.28 million and dividing it by the 98 units. These are housing successor funds and are restricted and can only be used for affordable housing purposes. And finally, Garden Court meets the affordable housing priorities outlined in the city's consolidated plan and housing element. This concludes my part of the presentation. We have Mr. Rob Fredericks, the Executive Director from the Housing Authority, who'd like to make a statement, and then we'll open up for questions at that time. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Rowell. Mr. Fredericks?
Good afternoon, Chair Hart and Council members Dominguez and Friedman. Thank you for considering this item today. And before I make my statement, I'd like to introduce a few people that are with us today. I have our board chair, Pat Wheatley, with us here, and Housing Authority Commissioner Jeff Green just arrived. Welcome, Jeff. And my colleagues, Skip Szymanski and Dale Azam. And if I can't answer any questions, they're sure to be able to answer them. And we also have our former executive director, Rob Pearson, with us, and former Commissioner Barbara Allen. And I think it's important that they were here today. They were the 2 driving forces of the Housing Authority initially getting involved in this development, and they have the historical knowledge in the event I can't answer anything.
Thank you all for coming today. It's great to have you here.
So, one of our goals as a housing authority is to promote healthy aging in place among our senior clients by creating a continuum of services and supports that are progressive in nature. And part of our mission is to foster a community which allows all low-income seniors to access affordable housing and live healthy, meaningful, independent lives. we have created over 593 units. That's 43% of our portfolio dedicated to low-income seniors. Unfortunately, as David mentioned, the need for affordable housing and care is continuing to grow in our community and throughout the nation, in fact, for seniors. The cost of living of a single senior in Santa Barbara County is $2,429 per month when you factor in food and housing costs. Yet 1 in 14 seniors live in poverty in Santa Barbara County. That translates to over 7,000 seniors, and 8% of the county's homeless population are seniors. And this is where the idea of Garden Court was born. It was born out of a recognition of this growing need and seeing far too many seniors having their quality of life lessened because they didn't have services available or affordable housing, and they were moved to places such as skilled nursing facilities far too early. And the idea of a model was that we could create a non-licensed, service-rich development that provides 3 meals a day, housekeeping, and a host of other services that could extend our community seniors' independent living, and they could continue to have a good quality of life, living with dignity. This is Garden Court. This is what Garden Court is all about, and it has been a huge success. When you walk in and you talk to the residents, you immediately feel the love they have for their home. The average age is 79, but over 50% of the residents at Garden Court are above the age of 80. Our oldest resident is turning 99 next week. The median income of residents there is $13,000 per year, and 90% of the residents are extremely low income, living below poverty level. 35% are disabled. Without Garden Court, many would be homeless and destitute, or as I mentioned, relegated to skilled nursing facilities. These residents are the people who have worked for our community, raised families, and served Santa Barbara to make the great community it is today. We are taking care of those that have taken care of us. Mr. Doral did a very good job laying out the reasons we are asking for debt forgiveness for this property, but let me reiterate just a couple of points. Due to the original financing structure, the city funds were given as a loan instead of a grant. The city could have easily have granted the RDA funds originally if it were not for the initial tax credit funding structure. Therefore, we now have this loan, which has always been a non-performing loan, and the city, as Mr. Rell indicated, contemplated the debt forgiveness when the Housing Authority purchased the property. That was contemplated early on when the original loan was given. The debt forgiveness will help us put the property on a firm financial footing into the future. We'll be planning a major renovation of the property in 7 to 10 years, and the rehabilitation and recapitalization will be more likely to be able to be accomplished without having this extra layer of non-performing debt. There's no possible way of this debt performing. It would just continue to grow in accumulated interest accruing over time, and the balance would grow. So, lastly, I want you to know that this is a public benefit development. It is an asset of the Housing Authority, and like all of our assets, they are really the assets of the city. Although we are a separate public entity, we are your affordable housing operating arm, as David mentioned, and we are your stewards of the city's affordable housing portfolio. On any given Tuesday, if we were going rogue, the city council could appoint themselves the commission. That's how closely tied we are to the city versus any other nonprofit housing authority, housing agency, or a for-profit developer. And in analyzing every development, we look from the lens of how we can best preserve our property's affordability for generations to come. We would not request debt forgiveness on this property if it were not needed, or if it were not the best course of action for this property. In closing, we ask your approval in forgiving this loan at this time so that we can unlock our equity reserves and produce additional affordable housing into the future.
Thank you, Mr. Frederick. That was very well said.
Thank you.
Appreciate that. Any questions for Mr. Frederick or Councilmember Friedman?
Well, I'm first going to start by moving the recommendation. Have some questions as well, but we're trying a new policy at the council level of trying to make our motions first. So I think I'd try it out here in practice and then have debate on the motion. So,
All right. Point of order. Have we done public comment?
We have not.
oh, sorry, I thought you already called public comment.
I did it for items not on the agenda, but we have not yet had.
Then I'll hold off on making the motion.
Is there anyone in the audience who would
I
like to
actually
speak
have a
on this item?
question for Mr. Frederick.
Well, I'm going to call for public comment.
Well,
and then
you
I'll
asked
ask
if you had questions for him, and Eric said he did. And
Excuse me, I will run the hearing, and I will tell you when you can ask your
I'd
questions.
like you to run it effectively.
We would have, is there anyone in the audience who'd like to speak to this item? Okay, seeing no one, we're back to the council discussion and questions. Councilmember Dominguez.
Thank you. You mentioned a few times that there's a local component to the residents. Can you explain a little bit about how you regulate that, and then also maybe at the same time kind of what are the needs-based criteria?
Sure. So we have a local residency preference for all of our affordable housing programs. We want to serve for all of our programs, whether they're seniors, families, working individuals. We want to serve those in the local community, meaning South Coast residents, before we're serving someone who lives back in New York and just wants to move to Santa Barbara. So we have that local housing preference, and with Garden Court, it's been a really interesting feature. We have a preference as well for those residents of our other senior housing developments that are fully independent living, where they age in place and they can no longer do the cooking that's required to live healthy, or take out their trash and their daily chores, that sort of thing. That's what Garden Court was developed for. So we have a preference for residents to move up and out of our existing independent living senior developments into Garden Court that provides that higher level of services and care for the residents. And that unlocks the other affordable housing independent living for other seniors that are on the waiting list that are independent, that just need independent living. So Garden Court, we have the income limits that are required. The maximum income limit to move into Garden Court is 40% of area median income. And so there have to be very low income or below in order to move in there. That's one of the main criterias. The other criteria that we look at is needing help with at least 2 activities of daily living. So if that you need those services that Garden Court provides. That's the whole point of Garden Court, that we're there to serve residents that need that extra higher level of care. It's not unlicensed facility, but it provides that extra level of care that they can still live as independently as possible, but not have to worry about how they're going to cook their next meal, how they're going to get to their doctor's appointments. We have a van that takes them shopping and to doctor's appointments and to other social activities as well. So those are the main criteria that we use. The income levels, and also the need with at least 2 activities of daily living, that they need those services that we provide.
Well, I'm glad that people, are still shopping locally, so keep the van local. But that's a great answer. I think, there's so much talk now about programs and how effective they are. So it was great to hear from you that you have this prioritization system and that the other residences then have people coming in. So thank you very much for answering my question. I do appreciate it.
Thank you.
Mr. Fredericks.
Are there any other questions for staff or Mr. Fredericks? Councilmember
I
Friedman?
had a couple minor questions. First was, what's the age minimum to?
62 is the minimum age, and that's a requirement for our senior housing developments. So.
And then at the with the extension of 90 years from the date of inception of the project, would there be as we get closer to that time down the line, would there be a potential option to extend that as well, or would 90 years be it?
Well, I'm probably not going to be around in 90 years.
Just wondering,
none of us.
down the line.
But I would think there would be an opportunity with ownership of all of these developments, assets in your housing authority's portfolio. We intend to keep all of these developments affordable in perpetuity. So, when you do a major refinancing, if we look to the city to help with that, that's where we ask where there's an opportunity to extend out the affordability covenant. Just like with this action today, it was, well, we can consider this, but we're asking for extending out the affordability of this property as well, which we're willing to do because we want to see this kept as affordable.
Well, thank you. I think that's a great answer. That not only 90 years, but the goal is in perpetuity, is
Yes.
to do that. So, I don't have any other questions. So this time would apologize for botching the motion earlier, but would now be the time for the motion.
Yes.
So I'll move the staff report or the staff recommendation, A, B, and C. And I just think this is a great project. I think you did an excellent job, Mr. Rao, Mr. Fredericks, and all those who took part in this and bringing it to fruition. It serves a huge need in our community. There's a statistic that starting about 2010, there's about 10,000 baby boomers turn 65 every single day, going up till about 2024, I think. Mm-hmm. So we're right in the middle of that, and that gets that one slide where you showed that pretty soon there's going to be more seniors than any other. So this gets to why we need to build this housing, and we're lagging as a nation far behind in our housing for seniors, and it complements the new Hope Gardens that are under construction. So, and I think clearly articulated in slide 14 that this was always the intent, was to have this, and it was just because of the structure of the tax credit or the application of a grant versus a loan. So I'm pleased to be here and make this recommendation on the motion.
Is there a second for the motion?
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. Any other discussion to the motion? I would just like to add, too, that I was on the City Council and the Redevelopment Agency Board when this loan was offered, as a number of the people in the audience were involved in this project as well. And it was understood at the time that this was necessary to use the state redevelopment funds that were affordable housing set-aside dollars that had no other purpose than to be used for affordable housing projects. This was a funding mechanism that was necessary to get the tax credits to be able to build this project. These deals are very complicated and involve a variety of different funding sources and specific rules and regulations at the state and federal level about how you apply those, and the city has been following that strictly. This is an opportunity to take that debt and turn it into essentially assets for the Housing Authority to continue to expand the opportunities for affordable housing, as Councilmember Friedman described. It's an ongoing need. We really essentially need 10 more of these projects at the same size to meet the existing demand, let alone the future demand. So anything we can do to help in the mission, and an incredible, efficient, successful mission that the Housing Authority is on, is important for the council to support and be there for. So I'll be supporting the motion, and with that, we'll call the vote. So all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? None, and no abstentions, so the matter carries unanimously. Thank you all for coming today.
Thank you.